Today's story is a little bit disturbing, and I will recommend you watch this video if you don't have a strong stomach. Also, if you are not matured, I will recommend you watch this video because there will be some footage shown at the end of the video which might be disturbing to some viewers. And so, viewers' discretion advised. But before we get into the video, if you like this kind of spooky, creepy style, mysterious style documentary video, please consider subscribing because I upload every single week. And so, if that's of interest to you, hit the like button and also subscribe. Now let's get straight into the video. On the chilling afternoon of June 23, 1965, the Houston police, which is Texas, received a call from a man named Marvin. Now, Marvin complained about his aunt not picking up the phone after trying to reach out to her for, several days. According to Marvin, he tried calling his aunt for about 6 days but had gone unanswered. So he was calling to, inform the police to help conduct a welfare check because he was not, close to her aunt. Her aunt was Edwina Ivoroga, who was 73 years old at the time and was married to Fred Christopher Roga, who was also 81 years old at the time, and they lived with their adult son Charles Roga, who was 44. And so after police received the call, 2 officers were sent to do a welfare check on the Rogas to see whether they were okay and why they weren't picking up the call. These 2 police officers were Captain Charles Balog and his partner L.M. Beta. And so after the police officers got to their home at, Montrose, Houston, Texas, they noticed a couple of oddities. The house was a modest house with some trees in front of it, nothing extraordinary. But it seems nobody was home. And a few things seems off. They knocked a few times and tried to get someone's attention, if any, but no one, answered. And so they tried to, open the door and enter by themselves, but the door was locked and it seems nobody was home. They tried the back door to, see if it was open, but the back door was also locked, like they couldn't open. When they peeped through the window, kind of forced open the window and popped their head through it. There were flower pots stacked against the door, and so they had to force their way through the door. Captain Charles pushed the door very hard and they were able to, get through the door. And once they were inside, they didn't really notice anything unusual. And nobody also was in the house except, some food which was sitting on the dining table. And it looked like, someone was eating it and the person suddenly stopped because they could tell that the food had been there for a couple of days and had gone bad. But it was nothing out of the ordinary. And so Officer Beta headed upstairs and Captain Charles headed for the kitchen to do a little investigation. As he was looking around, kind of opening and closing and then flipping things around, he opened the fridge. Now, it isn't exactly known why Balog opened the fridge, and Balog himself was unable to recall exactly why he opened the fridge in later interviews, but maybe I think he was just opening it, out of curiosity to, do normal investigation things. While Officer Beta also, did the same thing upstairs. And so as he opened the fridge, at first glance, the fridge was kind of choked with what he described as butchered hog meat. But seeing that the Rogers weren't home but, had so many meat in the fridge, to him didn't make any sense. He was like, why would they have so much meat in the fridge if they knew they weren't going to be around for some time now? I mean, clearly it didn't make any sense and it will go waste over time. To him, it was just kind of odd. But just as he was about to close the door, he glanced down the vegetable drawer, kind of the clear glass of the vegetable bin. And visible through the clear glass vegetable bin was a woman's head. He was immediately shocked, and at first he thought, he was maybe hallucinating or something. He was like, did I just see that or I didn't? And so Balog closed the refrigerator door and then reopened it again, and indeed the head was still there. He wasn't hallucinating, and so he quickly yelled out to Beta to come check the gruesome discovery. And upon further investigation, that was after they opened the other vegetable drawer, next to the other one was another human head, this time a man's head. And so Beta immediately called for backup, and after some officers arrived at the scene, their suspicions were indeed confirmed. It turns out the fridge was not stuck with hog meat as Captain Balog initially thought, but rather it was the remains of Frederick and Edwin Rogers. Their bodies had been carefully dismembered and packed into the fridge. And after medical examiners examined the body, it was later determined that whoever did this took their time and had some form of anatomical knowledge. And after doctors performed autopsy on the body, it was revealed that the couple had died on June 20th, which was like 3 days before their bodies were discovered. Edwin was shot in the head by a single bullet, while Fred, her husband, had been bludgeoned to death with a claw hammer. That means whoever did this had basically beaten him with a claw hammer to death. They also described that his eyes had been, gouged out and some of his body parts had been removed. When the police arrived at the scene, the house had been thoroughly cleaned, but investigators did find blood stains in the bathroom and the bathroom walls, which means their bodies had been butchered there. So seeing the horrific crime, police immediately started investigating. Now, one question continuously popped out in their mind, and I think that also popped out in your mind as you were listening to this story. And the question was, where was Charles Roger? Because he was the only one living with his parents and presumably the only person who has survived, because he wasn't there and his body was not also found anywhere in the house. And so maybe the police thought he could provide essential information about what happened. Evidence gathered in the house also pointed out that maybe he could have much larger role to play in the case. Yes, the police believed that he had something to do with the crime, but didn't have any solid evidence that pointed directly to him. Also, he was nowhere to be found, and so immediately Charles Roger became the primary suspect. Another thing that stood out to investigators was the fact that the only blood stain beside the one found in the bathroom was found on Roger's keyhole in the bathroom door. Not only that, they also found a handsaw in Charles Roger's room. Now, it is worth knowing that Charles Roger had a very reclusive nature and seemingly cold relationship with his parents. According to neighbors, he was the type of person who didn't like that much of, social interaction. He was also seismologist, as profession. Basically someone who studied earthquake and other related phenomena. And he was also a pilot but was unemployed. But one thing that was kind of odd about him was that he only communicated with his parents by a ways of slipping notes under their doors. Kind of, you write whatever you want to say and then slip it under his parents' doors. That is the way he communicated with his parents. Another surprising thing was that neighbors were not even aware that Rogers lived with his parents, because he generally left the home before dawn and did not return until, after dark. Authorities launched a massive manhunt for Charles. Since Charles was a pilot in the World War II, they continued to check the records of airfield in the area to see if they could find anyone who matched, his description, who had left by plane. But they couldn't. They couldn't find any leads. They searched, but they couldn't get any leads. After investigators searched and didn't find any clue of Charles Rogers, he was ultimately declared dead in 1975, which was about 10 years of, searching for him without getting any clue about him. Now, there is no clear account of where he died or how he died, but to today, he remains the only suspect in this case. Although few people doubt Charles Rogers' guilt in the death of his parents, what happened on the summer of June 23rd, 1965, still remains a mystery. And so that will do it, guys. If you found something in today's video, please consider subscribing and also hit the like button because I upload every single week. And so till then, see you in the next one.